Hello guys, in this video we're going to create a very simple class to inherit from while writing your own one-time scrapers. So without further ado, let's actually start writing some code. So first we need to import requests, and from BS4 import BeautifulSoup. The first library is needed to make outgoing HTTP GET or POST or whatever request, and the second one is needed to parse the content. And now let's draft a class itself, and I'll call this one-time scraper like this. So the very first method would be called fetch. So fetch, and it would take the self instance and the URL as the parameters. So first I want to print some debugging information here. HTTP GET request to URL and specify the URL itself. Okay, and I also don't want to print a new line at the end of the string, and you'll understand why just in a few moments. Then I create a response object by saying requests.get and the URL that was taken as the parameter here in the fetch function. And when the response fires, I just want to print the status code and say response.status code like this. And finally I need to return response object from this function. Okay, so let's actually create a scraper instance. So I say scraper equals one-time scraper and scraper.fetch, and let's try https google.com. Okay. Oh, it's a bit I just missed one T here. Okay. So here we've just made an HTTP GET request to google.com and received a status code number 200, which means OK. So that means that we can actually bring the text output to our console. So if we just specify a variable to store the response object itself, and then simply say print response.text. Well, in this case I hope to see the HTML response, and actually we have this response here, so this is quite pretty nice. Okay, so let's define a couple of more functions here. So the second function here would be called parse. So I say def parse, and this one would take a self instance as usual in Python and the HTML string basically. So here we need to create a content variable. Content equals BeautifulSoup, and the first argument would be the HTML content itself, and the second I specify the LXML parser, as the parser to parse the content. Okay, so also we can try to print the content just to make sure everything works properly here. So let's actually try and do that as well. So now instead of printing the response like this, I can simply say scraper. So yeah, like this. So scraper dot parse response.text. Okay, and just run this code one more time. So here we have exactly the same response, but in this case this response is not a plain string but a BeautifulSoup object. It's a tree-like data structure, so you can use the BeautifulSoup functionality to extract whatever text from here. But as far as this is not a topic of this tutorial, I won't be really covering this in this video, so just having this parse method is enough. Okay, the next thing to consider, which, well, at least that's the method that I've been using quite often in my videos. So in order to avoid torturing the web service you're scraping data from, it's really a good practice to store the HTML response to a file, and while debugging the data extraction logic, it's cool to reference the pre-stored file on your operating system instead of torturing the site with infinite GET requests. So let's define the method that is called toHTML, and this one take the self object itself and the HTML, and here we can simply say with open res.html. So we will be saving this file as res.html. We want to open the file stream to write the file as HTML file, and we simply say HTML file dot write and HTML, basically like this. So that's kind of it. So let me just quickly show you how that works. So if instead of parsing the text, we'll call this toHTML method here and quickly run the code. So as far as I'm working at pythonanywhere.com in the cloud, here's a little trick that I created in this particular application, which is called one-time scraper as well, that allows us to see what's going on in our operating system. So if we just import the hack module that is designed exactly for this sort of purpose, and say hack .ls and execute this stuff, then here we will see that response.html file has been just created. I mean, if I just remove that file at the moment, so res.html, so if I just remove and okay, hack.ls again, so we see there is no res.html file here. And if I just again invoke my toHTML method here, there we see, okay, res is not defined. Okay, just of course need to make a response at least for one time. So here we have our file saved, and also we can basically see the output of the particular file over there. So we just don't need this for now, and we can say cat res.html HTML, and we see the file content. Okay, but that's not really the topic of this video. I just wanted to show you guys that the file is really being stored to the operating system. So that's kind of it. So the second method we were supposed to implement here is called actually from HTML. So I say def from HTML and the self instance, and basically no more parameters here. So I say simply the same with open response.html, and now I need to read the file stream as HTML file. Pretty the same stuff, if not only changing this W to R. And also we need to create a content variable, or maybe just let's call this HTML, which would be a type of plain string here. And now we need to say for line in HTML file dot read HTML plus equals line, and at the very end we actually need to return our HTML here. So this is kind of it. Okay, let's try to run this to see if it works. Okay, so so we don't need to make this request anymore because we already have the file being stored. So I can simply say like response equals scraper to HTML from HTML and no parameters at all here. And if we then just try to print our response, then we have our response, and we read this response directly from the operating system, from the disk, from the current working directory we're working at. So this is kind of it. And now let's move on. So when I'm writing one-time scrapers, I'm usually using the results variable, which is the scraper's inner attribute, so results list here. And well, it's not, I don't mean that you really have to do that all the time, but it's really quite handy when you store the results as the list of Python dictionaries. So that would be the exactly the case of what we're supposed to do in this sort of library. So now let's define def to CSV method here, and it would be taking the self instance object, and here and also to make use of this we also need to import CSV module, and also let's import JSON module just for the testing purposes. So you will see in a moment why exactly we need the JSON module here, so just like this. So now I can say the very first thing to consider here is actually we need to open the file stream to write CSV files. So just exactly the same like with the HTML file, but here we say with open, let's call this results.csv, and we want to write the file stream. And here the first thing to consider, we need to create a writer, and the writer would be equal csv.dictWriter, and that's exactly the same dictionary writer I've been talking about. So okay, also as of course as CSV file, so just don't forget to define this file stream name here. So the first argument to the dictWriter method would be the CSV file stream itself, and the second one is a little bit more interesting. So here we will be using here we need to specify the field names, and as far as currently our results is an empty list, we can't really specify that, but let's assume that there is an element, and I'll create the test element just right in a moment. So let's assume there is an element of Python dictionary type. In that case we can simply say self.results and specify the very first element with the index of 0 and say dot keys. So this would return us a list of keys of the very first dictionary in the results. So that's the second parameter for the dictionary writer. And also we want to say writer dot write rows. That's the sorry guys, write header, and this is needed actually to write the column names to your CSV file. If you don't need the column names in the CSV file, you just can comment this line out. So that's it. And the very last but not least thing to consider here is actually we need to loop over the results. So I say for row in self.results, and remember that the row variable here would be the type of Python dictionary. That's quite important. And here we simply say writer dot write row, and the row itself as the parameter. So at the very end we can simply print some debugging information written okay, so let's call this results.csv has been written successfully. Okay, so okay guys, so now let's basically test this out, but before we actually start testing this stuff, we need to create a an element, a test element in the results. So in order to do that, well, we could have actually write a couple of all the logic of creating of populating the results is left to the parse method, which is not the topic of this particular video, so that's kind of it. But actually, well, let's do the following stuff here. So we can simply say scraper dot results equals results the 0 element, like this, or as far as this is, well, let's to make it more safe, let's basically append an element in this way. So we say let's say name John, and now email John at gmail.com. Let's also specify the age. Let's make it 34. Okay, well, that's basically enough for start. Before proceeding, let's actually check that out, if it works, if it did actually write the stuff into the results or not. So I say simply scraper dot results. Well, probably this is just enough. Okay, so here we got it. And if we want to pre-print this, we can even say JSON dot dumps scraper results, and specify the indentation equals to 2 spaces. So now we have it a little bit more in a prettier way. So this is kind of it. Okay, so actually from now on we can try to, okay, we don't need this print anymore, so from now on we can try to call the toCSV method here. So I simply say scraper dot toCSV, and well, I don't need this basically, and actually run. Okay, so it has been written successfully, so let's basically check that out at the moment. So if, like, again, I just quickly import my quick hack library and say hack.ls and execute. So here is our results.csv file, and if we just want to have a look what is in there, we can simply say cat results.csv, and okay, so hold on a sec, guys. Okay, so it's just a wrong file name here, so it's called results, not the result. And by the way, in this sort of environment, if you have this 2 appearing, that means there's some sort of an error occurred. So you can simply enclose your constant, your code into try accept construct and say accept exception as E, and then simply print E, and you'll see that there's just no such a file name called results.csv. But in case if you'll use the results, well, in this case everything is just fine. So we have our field names that are specified to be written over here in this line, and also we have the very first line here. So if we just manually append, well, we're gonna actually quickly just duplicate the code. So, well, doesn't matter that they are absolutely the same, just to show you this is an example. So we can have as many lines here as we want, basically. This is the CSV, the CSV file inner content. Okay, so this is kind of it. And now, what next? So, okay, let me just see what else here. Okay, guys, so it seems like this is it regarding method definition. And now let's actually, well, actually already did store this sort of file to the disk, but I'll do this just one more time just to show you all the steps I've been doing here. So okay, so at the moment nothing probably would happen. Okay, so now I just take all this stuff and copy, and here I have just yet another instance of this sort of application. I simply say import hack and hack.touch, and this method allows us to write files to the disk, and the very first argument would be the file name. I'll call this ods.py. Well, before doing that, I just need to delete the existing one first. So let me show you. So I've just created this ods.py file. So first I will delete that one. So let's say rm ods.py, and that's ls one more time. Okay, so no that file here anymore, and now let's actually create it again. So I say hack.touch ods.py, and here I use the multi-line input to store the file to the disk, and just execute this code. And here we see that ODS has been successfully created. So if I just okay, just delete everything, doesn't matter. So import hack. So if just no, not ls but cat and ods.py. So here we see that we got our module in current working directory. So we don't need this hack anymore. So now I'm going to show you how to inherit from this class and how to use it in a real world jobs when you're making one-time scrapers. Okay, so the very first thing to consider is to say import ODS like this, and then you need to define your own class that would inherit from ods.onetime scraper. So let's call this class the quote scraper. So it's pretty traditional for scraping quotes from quotes.toscrape.com. And in order to inherit from a parent class in Python, we need to say simply ods.onetime scraper. And by inheritance, I mean that from now on, this scraper has it does support all the methods that are defined in here in the one-time scraper class. So even though we didn't define the fetch method here, we can, when we create the quote scraper instance, we can simply say scraper.fetch and it would actually fetch. So here it would be enough. Well, first let's define the very first run method here and simply say, just for the testing purposes, saying fetch, not fetch but self.fetch, and again, well, let's fetch quotes. So http quotes.toscrape.com. okay, so that's pretty enough at the moment. So okay, and now I create the instance of quote scraper. Note that it's the instance of quote scraper at this moment. So I say quotes scraper like this. So let's see if it works. Seems like it is. And now if I simply say scraper.run, it should have make, okay, and it makes HTTP GET request to the given URL. So this fetch method is now working in inherited class. This is really great. So just like this, we can also use to CSV and from CSV, to HTML, from HTML to CSV, whatever stuff. And also we can print scraper.results. It's empty, but it does exist. So if it didn't exist, it wouldn't print that. It would give an error probably. Okay, so now let's try well, maybe not to write, but at least to draft some sort of stuff here. So I just redefined the parse method again, self and HTML, and I'm just wondering, guys, hold on a sec. Okay, I was just find out if the content variable is available, but probably as far as we've just redefined the parse method, it's not available, so we don't actually need this parse method over here. And okay, so just take that away, and basically, okay, just create yet another instance here, and just want to override this one more time, basically. So and say hack dot cat and ods.py. So I just want to check that out if I did exclude the parse method. So okay, it was after fetch, so no more parse method. Okay, this is just great. So we don't need this anymore. So well, probably, yeah, so let's define the content variable here equals to BeautifulSoup and HTML, the first parameter, and XML parser. Well, probably the user would like to specify some sort of an auto parser or something, so it's not a big deal to duplicate this sort of line every time you make any new scraper, so I think that's just pretty enough. And let's just print the content here, and also we need to invoke the self.run, but before, let's create a response object. Store the response object the variable, and here we'll say self.parse and response.text. Okay, so here we get our response back. Okay, and also okay, so let me also check that out one more thing here. So I just want to see if the response.html is still there or not. So I just simply say hack.alas, and okay, so these two files are here, so just want to remove those. So I need to say rm and res.html and results.csv. Okay, so now let's try to see what is there. So hack.ls. Okay, so the hack library still needs some work. Okay, let's basically, it did remove the results, but it didn't remove the response HTML. Okay. Okay, now we did, so this is kind of great. Okay, so now let's, okay, so yeah, okay, scraper.run. Okay, so now within the run function, let's play around with this stuff even more. So here, instead of parsing, we can simply say self.toHTML and specify the response.text just exactly the same. So okay, running this, and here I just want to see, okay, so response.html has been considered here already. Okay, And now let's actually pass the content to the parse using the from HTML. So we don't really need this stuff here, and we can simply say response equals self dot from HTML, and yeah, this is it. And now we need to pass on the response itself, because the response is already a type of plain Python string. So I hope to see. Okay, so I see the parse content again, but this time it's taken from HTML, not from the response object, and that's pretty important stuff here. So okay, now let's as far as our methods regarding from into HTML works fine, and fetch works as well. So the very last thing to consider is to check that out, the toCSV method here. But before doing that, let's actually draft a quick scraper just to populate the results list of the quote scraper. So I need to extract the quotes, which would be equal, I'm using the list comprehension just straight ahead, so I say quote.text for quote in content dot find all, and here we're looking for the span tag, and the class CSS class would be equal to text, and let's print the quotes. Okay, so here we got our quotes. Okay, no need to print results for a while. And okay, and now we need to do almost the same, but for the authors. So I'll simply say authors equals author for author in content find all, and this time it's the small tag, and the class equals to author. I've done this 100 times already, guys. That's why I know the tag names and the class names without even looking to the quotes to scrape.com site. So just don't be confused by that, please. Authors. Okay. So here we have our authors. Okay, here are our authors, and now we simply do a loop over the index. So I say for index in range, and here from 0 to the length of, well, let's say quotes. That doesn't matter, we can use authors as well, because the length of this two lists is absolutely the same. And well, I didn't check that out, but I know that, believe me, guys. So if you're not sure, you definitely should have checked that out. But okay, let me just to make sure, I just want to print the length of quotes and also the length of authors. So like this, 10 and 10 elements each. So just like I said, I didn't really trick you, fool or something. So now we need to here well, first we can create just an item, which would be the type of Python dictionary, and here we can say author, and this would be equal to authors index, and here quote itself, and this would be equal to quotes at the given index. So also we can print, saying json.dumps to pretty print this sort of a dictionary, and the item as the first parameter, and in that equals to 2 spaces. So here we have the list of our authors. So don't forget that you always can change the size of the console if you're using one-time scraper app that I've created especially for you guys to write your web scrapers online at pythonanywhere.com. By the way, if you want to have exactly the same environment as I have here, you can just see the link in the description below this video where it says that where you can sign up to pythonanywhere.com and only $5 per month would allow you to have absolutely the same environment and do exactly the same what I do here in this tutorial. So with a free account you won't be able to make outgoing HTTP GET requests, so that's the reason why you need that $5 subscription. Okay, well, but of course you can run this code in your local system, but for those of you who don't want to set up the Python in your local system but want to work in the cloud instead, Python Anywhere is probably the best ever solution out there. Well, at least me personally love it so much, so I highly encourage you guys to use this sort of service as well. Okay, so as far as our items has been extracted correctly, we can simply say here self.results.append, and we don't need this print statement anymore, so instead we can print the results here at the very end just to make sure that results has been populated correctly. So here's the list of our results. So the very last thing here left is actually to store our data to CSV file. So we can simply say self.toCSV, and as far as the type of our results data is the list of Python dictionaries, so this to CSV would work just perfectly well. So I simply say self.csv and that's it. So results has been written successfully, and now we can just check that out quickly, so that was really the case. So here is our results, and if I just try to have a look at results.csv this sort of way, that we see that the results has been stored. So, and by the way, of course, if you have a subscription to pythonanywhere.com, it's not a big deal to take the file away, but even just blind copy pasting this from here to your local file system file and then opening this in an Excel-like program would result absolutely the same table as if you have done this on your local system. Okay guys, so this is basically it for this video. So what I wanted to say here, that instead of writing this much of code, you can simply implement a couple of functions. So the parse to extract the data from the given site, and also the run method that would specify the particular order of making your scraping operation. So these are kind of two methods that might differ from one scraper to another, from one-time scraper to another one. Okay guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video, so until next time, and take care.